Joe has pointed his gun at Tagomi's head, and the old trade minister has already accepted his fate. Just as he closes his eyes waiting for the shot to be fired, he hears nothing but silence. As Tagomi turns around, Joe is nowhere around. A group of 3 Japanese soldiers walks by and Tagomi is once again safe. Tagomi rushes back to his home and makes a call to Juliana, warning her that there was an attempt made on his life today. Tagomi tells Juliana that he is fairly certain that the man who made an attempt on his life was Joe, and tells her to stay away from the man. Juliana, however, doesn't want to refrain from contacting Joe. Having seen the tapes, Juliana wants to get closer to Joe to find out if he knows anything about the tunnels from the tape. Elsewhere, Joe reports the failure of his mission to Himmler, but assures him that he had everything under control. He even tells him about Juliana and how he had almost managed to win her trust, after which she would lead him to the man in the high castle. Himmler is pleased with Joe's report despite the failed mission, and gives him some more time to finish off Tagomi. Back in New York, Smith allows Helen to resume her therapy sessions with Dr. Ryan on the condition that the topic remains strictly about Thomas and nothing else. Smith, however, doesn't really trust Helen, who is in a very bad condition mentally, and thus gives Dr. Ryan a visit himself. Smith reminds the doctor that everything they discuss must be on the topic of their son, and nothing else. The Nazi officer tells the doctor that if any information that his wife gives him leaks beyond the doctor, he will be responsible, and will have to pay with severe consequences. Inspector Edgar Hoover manages to gather all the requested data asked by Right Marshal Geroge needed to frame Smith for treason. He finds that not only did the Smith family kill the Adlers to hide their son's illness, but they also were using the Reich's funds to get the boy kidnapped by anti-Nazi men so that he could live a normal life in a safe haven in Argentina. There was enough proof that would cause Smith to be charged with treason and punished with a death sentence despite his rank. In the neutral zone, Chilton and Ed try to hitchhike to the Pacific states. However, they both fail miserably, with everything that they had gathered stolen away by bandits and stranded in the middle of nowhere. Chilton gives up, but Ed still has hope. He shows Chilton the John Wayne's buckle that they had forged back in the neutral zone. He had hidden it in his underpants when the bandits had arrived. Ed tells him that all was not lost yet, and they could still make some money. He reveals his wish to stay in the neutral zone as he has nothing left back in San Francisco. Chilton hesitates at first, but then agrees to head back to the neutral zone when they manage to get a ride. Hoover then heads straight to the Smith household, where Helen has just arrived from a really intense session of therapy. Helen is surprised to see the inspector, who tells her that there has been new evidence that has surfaced in the case of Alice Adler. The police had found a blood-stained button that looks like it belonged to Helen. Helen agrees to have gone to meet Alice on the day of her death, but denies anything to do with her death. The man listens to her but doesn't note down anything. This was all an elaborate way of threatening the Smiths that their time was coming to an end. When John comes back home, Helen tells him everything about what had happened earlier with Hoover. She is hysteric and fears that she will be taken into custody soon, but John assures her that nothing of that sort will happen. He will make sure of it. Just then, John gets a call from Himmler for his immediate presence at the Right Marshal's office, and so he leaves. Back in San Francisco, Juliana decides to go and confront Joe about everything, and manages to track down his apartment. As soon as she enters, she starts piling up questions to Joe, who doesn't seem all too happy to see her there. On top of that, Juliana also sees a very secret telephone that Joe had been using to contact Himmler. The two get into an argument and Joe pulls his trump card. He reveals that he had to kill his father to get Himmler's trust, and that was the only reason why he was alive. All the allegations that Juliana was pushing at him were all false. He was only a simple attaché. This, somehow, manages to convince Juliana, who feels sorry for the guy. She and Joe once again end up sleeping together. On his way to the Right Marshal's office, John makes a visit to Thelma and picks her up in his car. He had asked her to gather information on Hoover, and Thelma had done just that. After getting what he needed, John then heads to Hoover's office and confronts him about what he had done back at his house. He reminds Hoover that he too had dirt on him that could get him punished, and unlike Smith, Hoover would be given a death sentence. After this brief encounter, Smith confidently walks into the Reich Marshal George's office, where Himmler has also arrived. George proceeds to reveal to Himmler and everyone around the room the crimes that Smith had committed against the Reich. From the murder of the Adlers to the conspiracy of kidnapping, George names it all. Himmler is furious at this and demands that George present the evidence of all of these serious accusations. George proudly asks Hoover to show what he had gathered, but the man had already switched sides. Hoover tells George that he was mistaken. There was no proof against the Smiths. The Right Marshal is dumbfounded as to what he could do. The man he trusted the most had betrayed him in the last moments. Himmler quickly takes George into custody for trying to frame a high-ranking official. After George is taken away, he asks everyone but Smith to exit the room. Himmler then confronts Smith about the whole incident. He tells Smith that he knew what he had done for his son, and that all the accusations against him were true, and tells him to be more careful about who he trusts. Himmler tells him that he needed to take care of his wife and control her so that she doesn't become a liability. Himmler had been grooming John to become the Reich Marshal, and wasn't ready to lose such an important asset to the vulnerability of a woman. He tells John to set his wife straight or she shall be dealt with by Himmler himself. Himmler then promotes John as the acting Reichsmarschall and leaves. That night, when Juliana suddenly wakes up in the middle of the night, she finds Joe beside her, awake. She tells him that she had one more tape that had been making her feel uncomfortable around him, and asks him if he wants to see it. Joe agrees to see the tape so that he can know exactly what she had seen. Juliana gets up and heads to the other room to get the tape, but instead, she starts scratching through the same case that she saw earlier containing the secret phone. Inside, she manages to discover the hit lists that Joe had been assigned and realizes that he was the one who had followed Tagomi. As soon as she realizes this, she starts searching for her gun, but Joe enters with her gun in hand. Finally, he shows his true self. It was too late for manipulation now, and he threatens Juliana to take him to Tagomi. Juliana goes to the other room to get dressed so that they can leave, but as soon as she goes there, she starts searching for a weapon of any kind. Joe realizes what she was doing and barges in to make her stop, but as he moves towards her, Juliana turns back and with what she had gathered manages to slice open his neck. Joe was dead. Elsewhere, George has been sent into exile to Cuba and is spending his life there, hoping that someday he might come back and get his revenge. However, on his very first night in Cuba, an unknown assassin enters his house and stabs him in the back. With only 4 words on his lips, Smith sends his best. Juliana is on the brink of breaking after she deals with Joe. She grabs a smoke and has herself a glass of wine before calling the one person she has remaining, Wyatt Price, and asks him to meet her. Back at Joe's room, the Kempeitai are already there and find his body lying down. The room appears to be in a local love hotel, which confuses them as to why Joe, an attaché of the German Empire, would be living in the Love Hotel. That is when they discover the equipment that Joe had been using for communication and conclude that the man was a spy. Kaido rounds up all of the female prostitutes from the Love Hotel and interrogates them one by one in his office. One of the women seems to have seen Juliana come to the hotel on the day of Joe's death, and so Kaido shows her pictures to see if she recognizes the culprit exactly. The woman points out Juliana. Kaido immediately calls the new acting Reichsmarschall, Smith, to inform him of Joe and his death. The Japanese believe that Joe was working for Smith, and so the man's death will be thoroughly investigated. Smith then receives a call from the researcher working on the Traveler that the German Empire had captured, Fatima. Earlier, Smith had shown interest to interview the Traveler, and so the researcher calls him to do so. Smith reaches the place and starts interrogating Fatima, who doesn't look confused to be in an alternate reality. Smith asks her a bunch of questions, but before she could answer, she starts shaking vigorously. The researchers quickly go into the room and try to sedate her. However, Fatima's condition doesn't improve, and right before their eyes, the woman vanishes. Wyatt, whose real name turns out to be Liam, meets up with Juliana, who tells her to deliver the papers she had stolen from Joe, with the information regarding Tagomi and some other Japanese individuals, to Tagomi's office. Liam is reluctant, but Juliana insists that he was the only one she had whom she could trust this job to. Liam does as asked, and then the two make their way to the neutral zone once more on Juliana's request. Liam, like a white knight, drives Juliana all the way to Denver and to the safety of the neutral zone. Elsewhere, Smith finally gets back home and has a chat with his wife, who seems to be much better since she has started to go to therapy. Smith tells her calmly that Joe was dead, and also that Joe was the one who had killed his assistant Nat Reader. The Reichsmarschall reveals to his wife that Himmler had taken great interest in him and had great plans for his future, so he had Reader executed, as he knew all of his secrets. Smith then warns her indirectly that Himmler wouldn't stop at any costs, and would probably even kill her if she acted like a liability. Helen is filled with horror but doesn't speak a word. In the neutral zone somewhere, Samson enters a bar to find Ed and Childen having a drink. He instantly recognizes Ed and takes him aside to tell him that his best friend Frank was in fact alive. As Childen leaves after selling the buckle to an innocent buyer, Ed heads to where Frank was living as a painter. As soon as the two meet, Ed hugs his old friend without caring how he looked like. Ed was truly thankful that his friend was alive. The papers that Juliana asked to be delivered finally reach Tagomi, and he realizes that there was someone in the Kempeitai who was leaking important information to the Nazis. Tagomi immediately notifies this to the chief inspector, who takes matters into his own hands. Juliana, on the other hand, with Liam's help, manages to track down a Benson's hideout and head there. Although the man in the high castle isn't there, his partner tells them to sit down and wait for the man to come back. The episode ends as a huge parade comes out in honor of John Smith being announced as the new Right Marshal by Himmler himself. Himmler is planning for John to not only take over the North American side of the empire, but also perhaps something even larger. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and hit that like button to help our channel grow. Turn on the notifications so you won't miss any of our new videos. Thanks for watching.